Welcome to the Encore Audio Archives YouTube channel. I'm Taper Dave, and this is my channel. I've uploaded hundreds of talks here that I've recorded at meetings in West LA, and I've also recorded conventions starting in 2013. I've got a bunch of those up. And Walt and Mary Murray, the original owners of Encore Audio Archives, started the company in the 80s, and Walt recorded Joe and Charlie's and a bunch of stuff down in Vista, California. My sobriety date is June 20th of 1994. I hope you find something you like, so please like and subscribe to my channel and comment down below. If you want to hear something that I don't have or that you don't see, I'll see that I get it. Anyways, take care and have a great day if you want to.
Let's welcome today's speaker, Garry.
Hi, everybody. My name's Garry. I know I don't look like one, but I'm an alcoholic. Let me just take in the room for a second. First of all, I want to thank Tim for asking me to share here today. I texted Tim the other day, and I said, do I need to wear a tie for this meeting to speak? And he said, only if you want to look like a dork. So I said, I'm contemplating wearing a tie because in case my talk goes badly, I could hang myself. And he said, you don't need to do that. He said, if you suck, they'll do it for you. It's a real honor to be here and a real pleasure. This is a difficult thing for me to do today for a few reasons. One is I have so many friends here today that I'm really close to, and what happens when that occurs is that you got to tell the truth, you know, and for me, this isn't always an easy thing. I guess I have to deal with something that's obvious before I get started with my story. As you can see, what looked like a bald head. I'm not really bald, I'm just taller than my hair. 3 months ago, I was diagnosed with leukemia, and I've been dealing with that for the last 3 months. So it's the 400-pound gorilla in my life right now, and it's hard to tell my story and not make you aware of that. I'm going to tell my story backwards. I'm going to tell you what it's like now and then go back and tell you what it was like. We'll talk about alcoholism, we'll talk about recovery, but I need to tell you where I am today, for my sake, if not for yours. As I said, 3 months ago, I found out I had leukemia. It came out of nowhere. I was the poster boy for health in almost 30 years of sobriety. I've been sober 29 plus years, and I totally changed my life when I got sober. When I found you, I was an emaciated 118 pounds. My health was as bad as it could possibly be. I was 40 years old. I never took care of myself. You know, all I did was get high and get drunk and try to have a good time. And then when that stopped, I found my way to you. But when I got sober at 40 years old, I started taking care of myself. You showed me how to do that. You made me go to doctors. You made me go to therapists. You encouraged me to do all these kinds of things to respect myself and as part of my recovery. And as I said, I became the poster boy for health. I physically was in great shape. I became a runner. I've done 3 marathons. I had all kinds of vibrant health in this program, physical, mental, and spiritual. It just all came back because I did what you told me. It wasn't quick, it took time, but eventually I became a very healthy man. So when I found out this diagnosis 3 months ago, I was really waylaid. I had no inkling that there was anything wrong with me until there was something really wrong with me, and it was overwhelming. This was really hard for me to deal with for a while. The first thought was, why me? What did I do to deserve this? You know, and then I realized that I didn't do anything to deserve it. You know, it's just the hand that I was dealt. And I was telling Marilyn when it first happened that I had this kind of resentment because I had walked around for the last several years thinking that I somehow was better than my peers. I had done all this stuff to take care of myself, and I secretly kind of gloated over the idea that, that look how healthy I am, look what I've done, and I kind of took false pride in that notion that there was something I had done and that I had accomplished that was better than what you had done. And I sat there, I had this smug kind of attitude about my health. And what leukemia did to me initially was make me aware that this pride was a character defect that I really had to deal with. I had no business and no right to feel the way I did, but I did. And I dealt with it, and it's been a great lesson. I've had a number of really great lessons in the last 3 months. The biggest lesson is about spirituality. For 29 plus years, I've tried to practice this program to the best of my ability. And one of the tenets of this program, and the thing that I think I most honor and most revere, is being of service, the importance of being of service. You taught me how to do that. My life has been sensational in 29 years because I've learned how to be of service. I've learned how to get out of myself and to try to help others. And it's just something that comes naturally if you stick around here. It becomes part of who you are. And this becomes a tremendous part of who I am, is a guy who you can count on to be there for you. If I can help you in any way, I will do it. You want me to show up and speak at a meeting? I will be there. Even if I don't want to, I will do it. I don't say no to AA requests, and I don't say no most of the time to service requests in my life or service opportunities in my life. When I got leukemia, I needed you. I needed help. And I'm so unaccustomed to accepting help or asking for help or being the recipient of help that it's been a tremendous learning experience for me. I laid in the hospital for 6 weeks. I'm in the middle of my treatment. I laid in the hospital for 6 weeks receiving chemotherapy and was rendered a dish rag. I mean, I had no physical strength at all. And all of a sudden, I was inundated by the love. Forgive me, I just get very emotional. Inundated by the love of the people that I know from Alcoholics Anonymous. You surrounded me with love, and you wouldn't take no for an answer. And it was incredibly hard to receive your love and your support. I'm just not used to it. I wasn't used to it. In 3 months now, I'm becoming used to it, and I've gotten to the point where I can say, okay, yes, I do need your help. Thank you for your love and support. I want your love and support. It's been a tremendous lesson to me. Okay, so I'm in the middle of dealing with my leukemia. I've got a little ways to go, but I have incredible tools for which to deal with it. What AA has given me, among many other things, is this incredible ability to deal with life on life's terms. I was dealt a lousy hand, I mean, no doubt about it. But I've accepted this hand that I've dealt. I don't resent it. I'm not afraid of it. And I'm going to walk through whatever God has in store for me, hopefully with grace and dignity and courage, all because of what I got here. All because of what I got here. I've been sitting in the hospital in the cancer ward with other cancer patients, and I've observed people who are terrified, who are resentful, who are angry, who are bitter, all these negative emotions because they don't have what I have. And what I have is what you taught me. So I thank you for that. Okay, enough about my leukemia. Let's talk about alcoholism. Thank you, Art. Wow. First of all, I got to tell you again, one more time, I just love Alcoholics Anonymous. To my very core, I love everything about what I've gotten from you people. And I don't know what I would have done had I not been an alcoholic. I mean, this is the greatest gift. You know, to think of alcoholism, a fatal disease, as a gift is a strange concept, but it's a tremendous gift because I certainly on my own for 40 years never had a clue on how to live. I'm from LA, born locally. I come from a very normal family. I had, I was born in the early 1940s, World War II. My father was away in the service. I had a stay-at-home mom who doted over me. I think the first inkling that alcoholism was going to enter into my body was this doting mother who gave me all these fake messages about what a wonderful kid I was. You know, it's a strange concept. You know, when I started talking about it and started understanding it, I thought, well, this is a weird thing to say in Alcoholics Anonymous, because I hear all these stories of deprivation of people whose parents, you know, whose mothers beat them and they abandoned them. And I had just the opposite. I had this doting mother who thought I was, you know, giving birth to me she gave birth to the baby Jesus, which is strange in a Jewish family, but... So the messages that I got as a kid was that I was handsomer than everybody else. I was smarter than everybody else, that I was destined for greatness. She just worshiped me, you know, and that felt very good as a young kid in this house, to be adored the way I was adored. The problems began when I stepped out of that house and into school and into among my contemporaries, and you know, it was very apparent to me that I wasn't any of the things she was telling me I was. I wasn't the sharpest pencil in the box. I wasn't, you know, I really loved sports, and I was just horrible at sports, you know, and the pain in my heart from being the last kid chosen in games and stuff was just, you know, it was overwhelming to me. So I started to believe that this woman was lying to me, and that was a hard thing to reconcile. How could this woman who adored me so be the bearer of this false news? And because I had so much attention in the house, I started to crave that kind of attention outside of the house. And when I couldn't be good enough to meet her expectations, I somehow figured out that being bad enough was good enough. And that's what I resorted to. I resorted to getting attention through being bad. And it just seemed to fit, and it worked, and it was easy. I was the class clown. I was always in trouble in school. And I had this mother who always, we talk about enablers. My mother was the great enabler. You know, she just made excuses for everything that I did. It was never my fault. It was always somebody else's fault. She would get called into the principal's office for something that I did, and she would make excuses. It was never me. It was always the school. And so I grew up with this whole conflict of who I was. And the harder I tried to I kept trying harder and harder to be bad, to create some kind of separation and reality in my mother's life. I thought it was important that she understood that I wasn't what she was saying to me, and she would always dismiss everything else and, keep telling this message of how great I was. I discovered alcohol. Well, as you can imagine, there was a lot of confusion as a kid. I was just really confused as to who I was. I was very sure that I wasn't the person that she claimed I was, but I didn't know who I was. And I was very frightened that I was destined for failure. That's the thing that I remember, destined for failure. Most of it had to do with my physical limitations of being very awkward and not good at sports, and I couldn't express myself very well. So I grew up conflicted like that. Then along came, as I've heard many times in these rooms, along came alcohol. And I discovered it at an early age among my friends. And it just, I don't remember that first drink, but I remember the magic of the feeling of drinking alcohol. It just calmed that fear. It calmed that nervousness. It just calmed everything, and it allowed me to be the person that I wanted to be. Even at a very young age. I guess I started around 14 years old. It was was in addition to drinking, I started to formulate a concept of who I was based on the heroes that I had in my life. And the heroes in the early 50s were the rebels. James Dean, Marlon Brando, the movie star rebels were the guys that I most identified with. I loved the guys who, walked into classroom and said, "Fuck you, teacher." Those were the guys that I most admired. James Dean used to put cigarettes in his T-shirt and roll it up like that. And so in my teens, you could buy cigarettes in cigarette machines underage. They were a quarter. A pack of cigarettes were a quarter. And I remember when you put a quarter in and you pulled that thing out and it made a kerplunk and that cigarette pack came rolling out boy, that felt so great. And I knew I was doing something really bad and really dangerous, but I would buy cigarettes and I would roll them up in my T-shirt. I was 14 years old and I just thought I was the coolest kid. So I identified with all the guys who were in my mind, breaking the law and rebelling. And I became very rebellious. I was a very rebellious kid. And alcohol and then drugs were symbols of that kind of rebellion. Good kids didn't drink, and good kids didn't smoke dope, and good kids, didn't smoke cigarettes. And I didn't want to be a good kid. I wanted to be a bad kid. And, it just seemed to fit really naturally. So this bad kid graduated high school. And I'm going to drag this story out because I know I got a lot of time. I graduated high school, and a thing that I was not aware of as I was matriculating through school and drinking and smoking dope as much as I could was that other kids were studying and preparing themselves for college. And I got out of high school, and I looked around, and all the people that I knew in high school were off to college, and there was no college in Gary's future. And my mother, needless to say, was devastated by this. My father, I should mention, I had a father. He was my father was a traveling salesman, and he was gone most of the time, or a lot of the time. And because I was a rebellious kid and acted out a lot and caused a lot of problems for my mother, my father was like kind of at wit's end to what to do to me. And he said one thing that impacted my life that I never forgot and never will forget. As he was about to leave on a road trip, I must have been 9 years old or so. He took me aside, and because I was giving my mother such a hard time, and her life was so impacted by my bad behavior, he took me aside and he said, "I want you to look at me." And he said, "I want you to know that if I die when I'm out on this road trip," he said, "I want you to go to my funeral and look down in the coffin and say, 'I put him there.'" I was 9 years old, and he's telling me this. So I used to go to bed at night, and I would go to sleep, and I go, "Please don't die." I was terrified that my father would die, and he wouldn't know that I really loved him. Wow, I don't know why. I don't think I've ever shared that. But what that meant to me, what that does mean to me is that as adults, we have such impact on our children. And my parents were just not aware of the impact that they had on me, on my life. And as a father, I've tried to be more aware of the things that I say to my kids. And my father just threw that line out loosely because he didn't know what else to say to me. But it greatly impacted me. And it also probably drove me a little bit further away from this family and into my own head, which was not a good place to be. Graduated high school, I went into the Army, which was for a Jewish boy, mama's boy. That was not a good idea. The only thing that I learned in the Army was that there were ways of escaping in your mind that I was not aware of. There is a lot of alcoholism and drug addiction in the Army, which surprised me before I went in. But what I did learn was to drink and use more efficiently and more surreptitiously. I learned how to hide my using in the Army because you're not allowed to be drunk on duty. And we were drunk on duty. Also because we didn't have alcohol available to us. We had to find different kinds of ways to procure alcohol. They only had 3.2 beer in the Army, which was this very mild beer. You'd have to drink a case to get even a buzz on. So we would find other sources of alcohol. I remember one of the things I drank, it was shoe polish. That was terrific. You drink, you could pour a liquid shoe polish through French bread, through a loaf of French bread, and what came out at the bottom was alcohol. And you would hope that all of the dye would get absorbed by the bread, but you'd put your mouth on the back on the back end of it and suck whatever alcohol came out. And then I was walking around with black lips. So my Army career was not very successful, as you could imagine. I ended up in the early 60s. I got out of the Army, and I gravitated to the Sunset Strip, which was where the adult Garry emerged. Roy's laughing. He knows this part of the story. It was sex, drugs, and rock and roll. It was the early 1960s, and that was where, to my knowledge, that's where it began. And I was a perfect candidate to fit into that. I had no ambition other than to have fun. That's all I wanted to do was have fun. Where was the party? And I had no limits on what I would do to join that party, what I would say to join that party, or what that party entailed. I just wanted to have fun. And there were a lot of people on the Sunset Strip in the early 1960s with the same intention. So I fell in with this crowd of people that didn't work, we lived at night. We went from nightclub to night. Well, they weren't called nightclubs then. They were clubs, and music was the thing that I gravitated to. There were lots of musicians trying to develop this era of rock and roll, and I fell into that. I kind of backed into a career in the music business, and I started this little PR company that quickly became very successful. Here's the part of the story I promised Roy I would tell. I had an office on the Sunset Strip in my PR days, and I represented pretty much a who's who of the talent in the 60s in rock and roll. I don't know how that happened. I had no preparation from it, but I did have one thing going for me that Roy loves. I had it in my office, this giant crystal bowl that sat on my coffee table. My office looked like like your living room. It had couches and coffee tables and lots of girls walking around with minimal amounts of clothing on. And on this coffee table in front of my couch was this crystal bowl that was always filled with cocaine. And the rule in my office was you could help yourself while you were there doing business. There was no to-go orders, but if you came up on any pretense into my office to do business, help yourself. And I became very successful very quickly. I don't know why. So at this point, at this juncture in my story, I became the poster boy. I'm the poster boy for several things, but I was the poster boy at this juncture for the Peter Principle. You know what the Peter Principle is? That I would succeed to my level of incompetence. And I started this little PR company, and it just took off, and I had no idea why. But it was going at full speed, and I was making a lot of money. I was having the time of my life, traveling around the world, representing these major rock groups, and not having a clue of how I did it or how to keep this thing going. All I knew is that the party was as big as it could possibly be, and I was at the head of the line. And but what happens, and it really is the story of what alcoholism and drug addiction did to me, it was that I burnt out. I just flamed out from addiction. I was totally unaware of my surroundings and what was happening in my life, and my eye was focused on that crystal bowl that sat on my office, sat on my desk, and then also all the other chemicals that I was using to try to create some balance. I would describe myself as a drug addict, but there was lots of alcohol in my life that I used to try to temper and balance and control my drug use. So what happened in this period of my life was that my using just got way so out of hand that I lost control of, I was there to do business, and I couldn't do business any longer. I was just a total wreck. And so this company fell apart. And one of the traits or characteristics of my alcoholism is when I do screw up like this, I go off somewhere, I lick my wounds, and I reinvent myself. I create a new Garry, and part of it is to distract you from the old Garry that just made this mess over here, and look at the bright new shiny Garry that I'm inventing over here in an effort to move forward. I'm a very fast starter and a very poor finisher, is what I learned in my using days. And I have great ideas on how to start something, and I have none of the fortitude of what it takes to finish anything. So I went from my PR and rock and roll business to being a movie producer. I talked myself into producing movies. As I said, I'm a great starter, and the same thing occurred in the movie business that I was thrown into. I produced again, I don't know how I did it, but I produced a movie that was a very successful movie in the 70s. And when you do something like that in Hollywood, you're given the keys to the kingdom. And giving me the keys to the kingdom was not a good idea. Old Peter Principle reared his ugly head, and I just totally blew up. Again, I was able to do as much of everything that I wanted to do. I had all this money. I had a lot of, I hate to use the word fame, but I was well known in my business. And life was really easy. And the only thing that I did with it was just to overindulge in all of the things that I thought were going to make it okay to be Garry. That's also, I guess I should get into that, but a big part of my story was that this using was largely about making it okay to be me. I never felt at my core that I was okay. I still carried around those messages that my mother imparted in me, how great I was, and knowing that I wasn't. So I tried to create all this outside stuff that was going to make it okay to be me. If I had a car that was shiny enough, if I had the right woman, if I had the big enough house, if I had a big enough career, that would make it okay to be Garry. But every time that I got to that big car or that big house or the right woman, somebody else had a better looking woman, somebody else had a bigger car, somebody else had a nicer house, and it was never enough to be me. So I was on this little treadmill constantly trying to create myself to make it okay to be me. This eventually, as I heard over and over again in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous, this came to a crashing end. 1980, I guess, my consumption of drugs and alcohol just overwhelmed me, and I became very dysfunctional. I was living at the time in Malibu Canyon. I was suffering from what the therapist eventually diagnosed as cocaine psychosis. I had done so much cocaine that I started seeing things that weren't there. There were people outside my house. I would look out the window and there were people in the trees, and I would swear to you they were in the trees spying on me, and I was insane. I was just nuts. And at this juncture, things started being removed from my life. I was no longer able to function effectively in the work area, and things started taking away. The bank doesn't like it when you don't make your house payments, so they took my house away. The finance company didn't like it that I wasn't making my payments on my car, so they took my car away. She didn't like it that I wasn't working and making any money anymore, so she left. And I just watched all this stuff being stripped away from my life, and I was incapable of doing anything about it. Mary asked me to tell this story, which I actually do like to tell. As it was all coming apart, I was living inside of this head that was just so nuts. Here I was losing everything. My career was in the toilet, and I decided to take up scuba diving. I was living in Malibu, and I became a heroin-addicted scuba diver. I would get up in the morning, I would get off on heroin, and then I would go on a day boat out that left for the Channel Islands. I would do heroin and sit at the bottom of the ocean watching fish. It seemed like such a good idea at the time. I would sit at the bottom of the ocean. When you went scuba diving, you had to go with a partner. And they would partner you up on these day boats. And I would look at this guy and I'd say, listen, man, I'm sorry to tell you, but you're on your own. I'm not I'm not partnering with anybody. And I would jump off the side of the boat and I would go down to the bottom of the ocean for like 40 feet and I would grab onto a kelp bed. And I'd hold on so I didn't drift away. I would just hold on to this thing and I'd stare and these fish would... But it sounds funny, but at the time it made a lot of sense. It was totally quiet. It was peaceful. There was nothing rattling in my head. It was totally quiet. Nobody was yelling at me. Nobody was, asking where the payment was. I'd sit on the bottom and look at all these beautiful fish. It just seemed like a good idea. I know this is a little out of sorts, but this is what I looked like. And if anybody wants to see it afterwards, I'll show you. But this was my scuba diving license from 1980. Why they licensed me, if you look at my picture, you would think that somebody ought to be arrested for licensing me. I showed this to my sponsor, one of my first sponsors when I got sober, 1983, I think this was. And he said, you put that picture in your wallet and you never get rid of that. He said, you keep it. I've had this in my wallet since 1983. He said, take a look at yourself. He said, and I did, and I thought I looked really good here. I got long hair, and I got a nice little necklace on. He said, no, look at your eyes. And I looked at my eyes. He said, the lights are on and nobody's home. And it's actually true. And I was the last person to know. So my world started really falling apart in the early 80s. 2 minutes? Oh, my God. Geez, and I didn't talk about recovery at all. You have to trust me. I've been in recovery for In 1983, I found my way to you. No, in 1982, I found my way to you. November 1982, had lost all of it. Everything had been taken away. I was living in my mother and father's house in the room that I grew up in. I was a 40-year-old failed big shot. I heard that term from the big book, and I totally identified it. Bill used that description. A failed big shot. That's what I was, living in his mommy's house. I had no car. I had no nothing. And I thought my life was over. It was a Sunday afternoon, November 1982, and there was the Los Angeles Times, who had been delivered to my parents' house. My parents were away, and I started thumbing through this newspaper mindlessly. And I came across a story about a new organization that had just formed called Cocaine Anonymous. It was a big write-up about this thing, and I don't know what made me read this thing, but I did. And at the bottom of it was the man's name who founded Cocaine Anonymous and a phone number. And I called this guy. His name's Tom Kenny. He was the man who found Cocaine Anonymous. And I called him, and I started to tell him my story. And I started to tell him what a big shot I was, and I started to try to impress him like I did everybody. And right in the middle of me telling him what a big shot I was, he hung up. Son of a gun. He just hung up the phone. And I couldn't believe it. I was pouring my heart out to this guy and telling him how lucky he was that I was calling today. And he hung up on me. Also in that article was an address. So I got in this car. There was a 1949 Chevy, I think it was. It was just this old piece of crap that somebody had lent me. And I drove down to La Brea, where the headquarters of Cocaine Anonymous was, not knowing what I was going to find there. And lo and behold, there was a meeting going on. If that wasn't a God shot, I don't know what was. I walked into this meeting. God, how am I going to get through this in 2 minutes? 1 minute. I walked into this meeting and my life changed. I don't know what it was that you were talking about, that thing, but I felt the spirit. I felt something in that room that it had been a long time since I had felt anything like that. And it was this energy and this spirit of recovering people. I sat in the back of the room. I didn't raise my hand. I didn't identify. Can I go over in a couple minutes? There's a couple things I want to say. What I did in the first 30 days was I'd listen. There was something there that I really wanted. I could feel it, but I was scared to death, and I was filled with shame. I was ashamed of where my life had gone to. So when the meeting ended, I would walk out, and I'd split, and I'd come back to the next meeting. But I didn't shake anybody's hand. I didn't talk to anybody. I just got out of there. About 30 days into recovery, there was a man named Fred Ellis, who's no longer with us, who, after this meeting was over, walked to the door that I would head to and exit as soon as the meeting was over, and he blocked the doorway. He just blocked the doorway. I couldn't get out. And I'm standing right in front of him waiting for him to move, and he doesn't move. And I have my head down because I'm afraid to look up. He grabs my shoulders, and he holds me, and he squeezes. And I can't believe what he's doing. He's just holding me, and he's locked in, and he's not letting go. And I look up, and our eyes meet, and he says a couple of words to me that changed my life. He said, "You're going to be all right." That's all he said. "You're going to be all right." Something happened in that minute. What I've come to understand was I didn't think I was going to be all right. I had no belief that I was going to be all right. I thought I had just blown it. Fred believed I was going to be all right, and I saw it in his eyes. And that was enough to get me started here. Here's the things that he said to me that I'll leave this, I'll end with this, and it's for the newcomers. He said, you only have to have one thing you only have to bring one thing into this room by yourself. And that's something that I can't give to you. And that's the desire to stop. If you have the desire to stop, we have a program that works, and your life will change. And I can teach you how to work this program if you want it, but I can't give you that desire. He said, and if you do want this program, and you do get this program, then I'll ask you something else. I'll ask you to give it away to somebody. That's the only condition we have here, is that if you get this program, that you give it away. I haven't forgot those words in 29 years. I have a remarkable life today. I'm the luckiest guy in the world because of you and because of the program of Alcoholics Anonymous. It's as simple as what I just said to you. You have to have a desire to stop. If you're new in this room and you're afraid and you have no idea, how you got here, stick around, please. If you got the desire to stop, we have a program that works, and we'll gladly give it to you. We want you here. Thanks for letting me share. Question time. John.
Garry, can you talk about your early days of recovery?
Thank you.
Your first year. Give us a little bit about the steps. Talk a little bit about
Thanks for giving me the opportunity to share about recovery, John. I'm sorry for getting carried away in my story without the recovery part, because really this is all about recovery. It's not about the war stories. It's about recovery. My first year, it was a lot of confusion. I had some very good sponsors and mentors in this, and I don't remember why I changed sponsors, but I did. I had probably 5 sponsors in that first year, all of whom gave me wonderful information. And so I guess there's this idea that when the student is ready, the teacher will appear. And that's really what it was. As I got more and more aware and more conscious, I would get mentors or sponsors who fed me more information that I needed. I worked this program diligently right from the very beginning. I had no question in my mind that this is where I needed to be if I was going to reclaim my life. So I didn't vacillate at all. I didn't go in and out. From the first meeting, I'm about to tell a lie. That's not true. I smoked grass for the first few months and didn't tell anybody because I was nervous. You guys made me nervous. And then somebody said, we don't do anything from the neck up. I went, what, neck up? But I did. I jumped into this thing diligently. There was a lot of, in the early 80s when I got sober, there was a lot of fellowship. I see my friend Bobby over there. Bobby used to take me we'd go out after meetings and we'd go to the melting pot or we'd go to the old world. And he'd put his arm around me and he'd walk me from table to table. He said, this is Garry. I want you to meet Garry. And all these people would just voice all this attention on me, and being an attention junkie, I love that attention. And what I found was that these people were so into sobriety and giving it away and finding a new guy that they could give what they found here. I felt that. I really felt that. And I feel it today as my obligation to give it away to others because it was so freely given to me with such enthusiasm and such love. And, I didn't feel very lovable at the time when I first started here. So I worked the steps as best I could. I wasn't very good at doing steps. I made all kinds of blunders doing steps, and what I eventually learned is there's no right way to do it. You just do it. And you do it under the direction of a sponsor, somebody who you can really, trust in. Right.
Hey, Garry, thanks for your share.
Sure.
You said you had a couple businesses that failed. Did you have to make amends to your clients?
Boy.
Sorry.
The question is, I had failures in my businesses. How did I make amends? I had lots of amends. I had a big part of my amends in my business was my loose tongue. I said very bad things about people often, and I had to apologize for the things that I said. A lot of lies that I would say. If you crossed me, I would get back at you, and I would do anything to get back at you, which involved lying often. And I had to sit in front of a lot of people and say, I'm sorry if I said things that were a lie and that I hurt you. And I did those. I made those amends. I had a large amends to make to Uncle Sam. I owed a lot of money in taxes that I forgot to pay. And I had to go to Uncle Sam and throw myself at their mercy. And it took me 16 years to get out of debt with the IRS. But I did it. I was scared to death to go in front of them. I thought I was going to be locked up. Not only wasn't I locked up, I was given a reasonable payment schedule that I could adhere to, and I eventually got through it. Got one time for one more question. My oldest friend, Richie. Second oldest friend. The question was I using, Richie and I were in Synanon together in 1968? 68. Actually, I had a head that looked like that, remember? We shaved our heads. Yeah, we shaved our heads in Synanon. That was they asked us to shave our heads as a commitment to Synanon. We shaved our heads. I was 28 years old walking around with a bald head. What was the question? Oh, was I using during that time? Yeah. Time one more? One quick one. Charlie. Can I talk about amends with my mom and dad? My mother stayed in denial throughout her life. I went to make amends to my mother, and she said, "You are not an alcoholic." She wouldn't believe that I was an alcoholic. I said, "Okay, well, I don't require you to believe it, but I, for my sake, need to say some things." And there were some very bad things that I did to my parents from my addiction, and I copped to those things. She totally forgave me. She just didn't want to hear it because of her denial. And my father, My father was more of a living amends. I just changed the way I behaved in front of my father and the things that I tried to really support my father in the last years of his life. I tried to be a good son, and I made my amends that way. He wasn't really capable, I don't think, of hearing a verbal amends, but he was capable of receiving good behavior that I tried to do with him until the end. Thank you very much.
I think we got a great talk going on here. Thanks for watching the channel. Taper Dave here. Just curious, do you think this is better than Zoom? Okay, this is how I prepare my drone for launching. I like to do it inside the cab of my truck so I'm not standing outside in the weather. To install the joysticks for control, up and down, right and left, powered on. I have an Android phone that I use to connect it to the drone with. And it's actually controlled through the iPhone, through an app. Oops, wrong way. It's actually controlled through the iPhone, or through this Android phone, through the app. It's actually controlled through the Android phone, through an app, and you connect it through this short connection right here.
Remote control connected.
Remote control's connected. So I pull out the drone. I have to extend the legs. Long legs extended first, then the short legs. Remove the gimbal protector. Set that aside, then power it on one short burst, then one long burst. I lay it down. So I have to go to calibrate. So the drone's not connected yet. It shows you here as this drone gets disconnected, even though the remote's powered on. So the drone has to establish it's connected. So I go into the app to calibration mode. First I'll calibrate the remote controller. Start calibration. Out, in, oop, out, in, up, down, and then this little wheel is to control the gimbal. So it's calibrated. Go to gimbal calibration, start calibration, and then it calibrates the gimbal. I don't know if that shows up. The gimbal's moving all over the place. Changes, you can see it on the video. And I'm calibrated to take off. It's acquired 7 satellites at the moment. There are 26 satellites up in the sky, which it has to acquire before you can take off. So it's connected. It's got enough satellites. This is white. I can go to press this little arrow button, swipe right to take off, and it would start the motors if I slid this to the right. But I'll wait till I get outside. Don't want to do it inside.